Okay, thanks very much for joining our session today. My name's Darren Kay. I'm an enterprise architect at NTT. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time just telling a story before we get into the slides, because I love stories and hate slides. But I was travelling down for this on the other day on the plane, and I was actually thinking of the similarities between the airline business and how they've morphed and changed versus the hospital environment. So 10, 15 years ago, maybe further for those of us that were travelling back then, the experience of travel was very different to the experience today. So the experience back then was there was no pre-check-in app, there was no mobile application. You would go to the service desk at the airport to get your ticket, and you would queue. And often, if there was 2 or 3 planes departing at the same time, you would queue for 20 to 30 minutes. So you would leave well in advance because you knew you had to queue at the service desk, and then you had to queue at the security border check-in. So it was experience-wise, it was rather a stressful time if you were travelling. You know, you'd often leave 2 hours in advance. Sometimes you'd stream through and have no queue and you'd be out the other side and have an hour and a half free. Other times you would just get through in time and they'd be calling your name. If we move through to today, most airlines have mobile applications. You can pre-check in the day before, the week before. You can select your seat. All of that's done via a mobile or a digital front end to that airline. So the digital front end, they've extended that to outside their premises. And it's taken away a lot of the stress, for me especially, around travel. I know how long I have to worry about that. I know that I can just walk through. If I've got carry-on only, I just walk through to the security border and check in there. So I'm no longer stuck at the service desk. I can bypass that queue, and like a network, I get stuck at security. Now, if we can move past that, maybe like a network, one day they'll do something like a SASE concept where I can scan myself at home, and then I don't even have to stop at the security border. I can just walk straight through to my gate. And then the travel time and my experience is quite short. Another story that I like around that as well is my experience when I'm at the airport. On the mobile application, I can see my plane and the departure time. If it's delayed, it notifies me. I've got boards around the airport showing my plane and departure times. So if I'm queuing, I don't queue at the gate. I go and find a coffee lounge or the bar or something like that, and I sit down and relax, and I just watch my plane boarding time. I actually only go to the gate the last minute or two prior to boarding. I don't queue at the gate anymore. Most people, if they've got airline lounge access, they actually have in there the walk time. So your walk time to your gate is 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And everybody times their minute to the last minute to walk to the gates, and they're there within 30 seconds of boarding time. They hardly ever stand around queuing at the gate, where 10 years ago, everybody was at the gate waiting, in the uncomfortable chairs, sitting there, not really sure when the plane was going to be there or not, just waiting. So that's the airline industry and how they've changed. But if we look at health and hospitals, a lot of hospitals are still back where the airline industry was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The recent opportunity that we worked on in New Zealand, they were still mailing out the pre-registration forms, so not even emailing. So if you're getting administered at a hospital, they're mailing it out for you to fill in. You can't change or very easily swap that around. You've got to ring them and contact them via their contact centre. So the experience is still back where the airline industry was 10 years ago. So what we're looking at this case study is how we worked with the hospital to try and change them and catch them up to be more like an airline for the experience for the patient, to streamline their experience through that environment. So just a little bit of these slides I'll share as well, so don't worry about all the information that's on them. But just to give you some of the data that we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing. So most hospitals today have been investing in the foundation, which is 100% the correct thing to do. The foundation is get your network right, get your wireless right. You can't go down a digital experience until they're in and working well. The other concept that I always like to say is when I'm mailing out administration forms, if my network went down, nobody knew. If I'm sending that out via a digital application and my network goes down, everybody knows. So the exposure to your network, the visibility of your network is now outside the bounds of your hospital. There are people that have mobile check-ins and can look at your forms online. They can all see that digital hospital remotely. So we've got to make sure that foundation is in, and it's critical. We call it life critical network. Make sure it's not just run as a standard network, it's run as a life critical network. Duress has been a big thing, especially in Australia, starting to come into New Zealand, where I've just come from. Duress has been mandated in a lot of the hospitals, so making sure your wireless is capable of duress, location tracking. Very big thing. What we're now seeing in the next 5 years is the integration layer. So we're now looking at all these digital applications that used to be standalone, And we're trying to work out how we can integrate them to get more out of them than if they're individual elements. So my experience in a hotel, I checked in, I walk upstairs, it's got my name on the TV screen. Yet often in hospitals, I have to re-enter my data and my details in multiple locations. Like, it can't be that hard to just have it sync between the systems. But at the moment it is. So integration, we're seeing, is the next phase of tying digital applications together to create a better experience for the client. And then what we're seeing in the future is personalisation. So this is fast coming. You saw on the keynote about AI on firewall rules. AI in healthcare is coming. Personalisation, digital twins, applying what-if scenarios to my metrics about my body, how I respond to medication. That's definitely where the future's going. So working with the hospital in New Zealand, we started to try and map out the journey. So we had the individual products. So we were given the job of bringing it all together as NTT and trying to make sure we got a consistent story and a flow between multiple products. It's not our products. We didn't build these products. We work with vendors, 4 vendors in particular, but we tried to make sure that they all had open back-end systems, open APIs and databases that we could integrate with. And we made sure that we lined key sources of data. I didn't want different people mapping to name fields or location fields. We wanted to get all that right. So from a client perspective, it was a seamless journey between the products. And the look and feel was though it was one product, even though it was multiple products. We went for a best-of-breed approach rather than a whole-off single vendor. And we believe that way, and by having open standards, we can keep competitiveness. So as we go to the next project, which is the next building, we'll try and reintroduce that and test that in the market again, make sure that it's still best of breed. So I'm just going to walk through the journey of today. Now, when we were also looking at the hospital, one of the key things that I had, having a personal relationship, my wife was in a hospital a couple of years ago, scary sort of incident happened. When you go to a hospital, 99% of the time it's not a good thing. So anxiety and stress is high. They're high for the patient because they don't know what's going on with their body. They're high for the visitor because the visitor is worried about the patient. So anxiety and stress is there. The lack of information and control is also a big feeling that drives stress and anxiety. So the more information you have and the more control you think you have of the situation, the more calm you're going to be. It's the same with the airline concept. If I actually could check in advance and I knew I had that covered, my stress level was a lot lower. I knew I could just get to the gate a lot easier. In the hospital environment, it's the same concept. At each stage, we're trying to provide information to the patient and to the visitor so we can lower that stress and anxiety and make them feel like they've got more control, which hopefully they do. So in this story, we're looking at the first top box there where somebody at home's done a test, the results aren't good, they've been recommended to check in to a hospital, go see a clinic. So if we just walk that through. So the check-in, like I said in the past, used to be a mail-out form. But now we're moving to more like the airline concept. We've got an application from 5 Faces, which allows us to have that digital front door on a mobile device. So when they ring for the appointment, an SMS gets sent to them with a link. They can open that link up and it's got all their administration details. They can push out smart forms so that the actual person can fill out the form, just like your security boarding details that you fill out on the Qantas app. You can do that with this application as well. So I can pre-fill in all my forms, check my appointment and do all that on a mobile device the day before I go to hospital, a couple of days before I go to hospital. With the application that we're looking at, we can push one out specific to each clinic. So each clinic in the hospital can actually have a tailored question form or a smart form. So rather than having a generic form that tries to capture all, we can tailor that experience per clinic. Within the application is the ability to easily reschedule. So one of the things I didn't realise is that most hospitals have a huge amount of do not shows or do not attend to appointments when they have the mail out concept. And the reason being is that to change your appointment, you have to ring and sit in a queue. And most people don't like to sit in a queue. So instead of ringing and sitting in the queue for 5 minutes to advise somebody that they need to change their appointment, they just wouldn't show up. When you give that into an application where they can just easily reschedule by a push of a button, the do not attends drop dramatically inside the hospital environment. So they're getting more people actually show up to their appointments or reschedule them if they can't make it. Within the application, what we've also done is launched wayfinding. So we put in a link. So when you book your appointment, it'll actually have a link that they can click on, which will bring up maze maps and show them the wayfinding as to how they get to the hospital and also how do they get to the clinic that they're actually meant to go into. So streamlining how they find their way around. We have had some stories of patients actually rocking up the day before to a hospital to actually work out where in the hospital the clinic is that they're meant to attend. So they'll do a walk by the day before to work out where they've got to go. So when they come back for their appointment the next day, they know exactly where they're going to go. Also, if you're running late and you're not sure where you are, again, your stress is up because you're lost, like finding your way around this place, to be honest. And then, and you take it out on staff. You're asking staff, where do I go? Where's this? Where's that? It can be an environment that's not the best. So we're finding that creating that digital front door, that it can extend to the home, they can do it a day or two in advance, reduces the stress and anxiety, providing clear directions of how they navigate is the key. The cool thing that we're doing with this application as well, or this application's got the capability of, is when you get within a certain proximity of the hospital, it allows you to join the queue. So just like the airline industry where they've changed the traffic flow patterns. In the old days, everybody went to the service desk. Nowadays, 80% of the people walk straight past the service desk and go to the security gate. So it's the same concept here. If I can pre-check in on my mobile device, I don't have to go to the service desk or to the digital kiosk where you get your number. I can just check in on my mobile device and then navigate my way straight to the clinical area that I need to go to. What the application does, just like the airline, is it also gives you the wait time. So now when I check in with my mobile app, so I'm in the queue, it says I've got 40 minutes. I'm not going to wait in the clinical waiting areas. They're usually hard chairs with no real comfort factor. I'm going to go sit in the coffee shop and have a coffee. The application will update you when you're getting closer to the front. So when you get, say, 3 from the front, it'll send a message saying, time to start walking to your clinician, time to get to the clinical waiting room. So we're now seeing the queues in the hospital being quite large in the waiting rooms, moving more into comfortable areas like coffee shops, and the queues being quite reduced at the waiting areas. An example they had was they did a maternity ward. And they used to have a lot of mothers with babies and the pregnant mothers with their, the next ones all queuing in the waiting room. Now the queue is only 3 or 4 people deep. They're all waiting out in the coffee shops where it's more comfortable and just going to that waiting area when needed. So it's basically, like we said to the health client, we're really just catching up to the airline industry with the experience of flow, the flow of people. So like I said, we launched wayfinding from the application. So in the solution that we put forward in New Zealand, we're using Maze Maps. Maze Maps allows us to embed that into any application. It's web-based, so we can embed that into any application. You don't need an application on your mobile device. It allows you to navigate to an area, to navigate to the hospital. It allows you to put in accessibility requirements. I am in a wheelchair, so it'll route me based on my needs. It has the ability to have a staff view and a patient view. So the same map can be used for all staff, all people. So staff view, I can see all the back-end rooms, but the patient view, they can only see the patient areas that they're meant to be going to. And when you do the patient view, the navigation doesn't route you through a staff access area. It routes you around the staff access area to only where patients can access. It allows you to locate assets, so you can see your assets on the display. So we're using the map from Maze Maps as a single source for a number of different integration and use cases within the hospital. So instead of deploying separate maps, we're using the same one and just linking it all back in. So we've navigated to our clinic, and where the clinic has actually said, sorry, Darren, you've got to go in for an X-ray and a scan. There's something there, we're not sure. So once I've gone in and been checked into the bed, the traditional experience was the TV, but I had to pay $25 a day to access a TV for free to air, which I, being tired, I'd never pay for. So what we've now implemented is a product from OneView, which is an all-in-one device on a swing arm. It's basically an Android screen that allows us then to stick anything that's on Play OS on that screen. So the patient can get free to air. The patient can get streaming content. So they can get Netflix and all their other streaming content. They can put in their credentials and watch it. But unlike Airbnb, when the patient leaves, the device gets wiped. So you don't have to worry about your credentials being left in the device. So from a patient experience, yes, I can watch TV, I can watch all the streaming products. I can also order my meals via the interface. But the big thing that I like is the fact that you can also see your care team. So when my wife was in there and I popped in to see her, they had her on some heavy drugs and she was sleeping most of the day. And it's like, who's your doctor? And she goes, I don't know, I was asleep when they come around. Who's your nurse? Don't know, I was asleep when they come around. So with this application, I can actually go in and see my care team. I can see the doctor, have a photo of him. So if I see him walking on the ward, I can actually go up and ask him a question because I recognise him. The same as the nurse. When the nurses change shift, I can see the nurse's photo on the device as my care team. So I know what her name is, I know that she's mine, and I can ask her a question if I see her walking by. It also shows you your schedule of what's happening. So if you're booked in for an X-ray at 3 o'clock, you can see that in the schedule on the device. So if you've got visitors coming to see you, you can bring that up and say, oh, look, I'm booked in for an X-ray at 3, so don't come at 3 because I probably won't be here. We've linked it to maze maps. So great example of the use case was visitors all want to get a coffee. You come in and you want to visit somebody, where's the coffee shop? So being able to bring that up on the screen as well so you can navigate. If the patient's okay to be walking around, they can bring it up, they can work out where the coffee shop is, and off they go as well. Then another component that we like about it as well is the education, personalised education goals. So with the device, we can actually push content out there for them to start watching. Can be video, can be PDFs, can be any sort of content, and we can track whether they've watched it or not watched it, or read it or not read it. So if I'm in for knee surgery, I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to try and, if I'm sitting around for longer than an hour or 2 hours, I start to twitch. So if I was in there for a few days doing a knee surgery, I'd be keen to start reading, well, what have I got to do to recover? What's the next step? What have I got to do to... With this device, we can actually push that information out so the patient can start reading about how do they look after themselves when they get home. What are the next things they've got to do? So again, it's just empowering the patient with if they want the information, it's there for them to look at. Another key story that I really like about this platform is service requests. So if you think about nurse call today, when I press the button, there's only one notification, which is nurse call. There's not a difference of 2 beeps if it's important, 1 beep if it's not important. Like I just press the button. It's a nurse call. The nurses don't know whether I just want a pillow or I've fallen out of bed. They have no knowledge of the severity of that button push. With this application, we can actually bring up service calls or service requests where we can say things like, do you need a blanket? Do you need water? Do you need a pillow? So that when they press them, it actually we navigate that to a different team to respond to that request. When you chat to elderly people in hospitals, they'll actually be cold all through the night because they don't want to push the button and disturb the nurses because they've got more important jobs to be doing. So an elderly person will stay cold all night rather than press the button because they're worried about the nurse seeing it as an emergency and coming running when it's just a blanket she wants. When we move to the concept where it's a service request and they can see that it's request blanket, in their mindset, they're seeing that that's a different person that will respond to that. It's not the nurse who's out there looking after people, make sure people are safe. It's a different person. So we're actually seeing an uptake in people using things and making sure they do get the blanket or the pillow, which is critical for their stay in care. So we talked about the all-in-one device that comes around on a swing arm. It's got a camera inbuilt and it's got a microphone inbuilt. So we can do things like telehealth to the bedside. So we can bring in doctors, we can bring in specialists to talk to the patient in the bedside. Also, like I said, because we're an Android platform on there, we can bring in the family members. So Zoom, we can do Zoom to home. Yeah, we can do it on a mobile device. They can hold up their mobile phone and chat, or they could just swing the arm around and have a big screen and sit there on a call for half an hour chatting to their family. In COVID, in the hospitals that had this technology, it was a massive uptake. Obviously, they're restricting how many people can get at the bedside, but how do we keep them in touch with their family and friends? So this is a great concept that's coming into the hospitals of the future. Another component which is also part of the OneView suite, which I think is quite cool, it's a very simple story to be honest, is electronic bed cards. So when you go to a hospital, you'll often see the little whiteboard at the end of the bed where they write key information like your expected discharge date, whether you kneel by mouth, you're not allowed to eat because you've got an operation coming, any other things of important note, they'll try and write on that board. That's a manual process that requires somebody to do and maintain. If that changes, something changes, i.e. you're scheduled for an op and your kneel by mouth status changes, you're requiring somebody to go around and update that on the board. So if they haven't come around because they've been busy, the dietitian could get the wrong information by looking at that board and misunderstanding what's required. So the electronic bed cards are a very simple device. They just plug in and they sync to the PAS system. So as soon as that information is pushed into PAS, it's pushed onto the bed card. You're not relying on anybody to manually walk around and update the card. You're not worried about any misinformation being with a delay in time and the misinformation getting out there. It's all in sync. Quite a cool little feature, to be honest. This next product that we're putting into the environment is more of the behind-the-scenes product. It's not really patient-facing, but it's what develops a quiet hospital. So Alinqua develop a message integration engine, which is the ability to take feeds from multiple systems. So they can take feeds from nurse calls, from fire alarm systems, from building management systems, and then we can create process and workflow around that. So what that means today is in the current hospital, before we can put this in, when they have an alert or an alarm or a duress, it gets broadcast on the speakers. It's the only way they can do it. They broadcast on the speakers and they hope whoever picks it up and responds to it. With Alinqua, we can take that message from a duress push of a button and we can silently send that out to the relevant people to respond. We can send it to their smartphones or their pages or other devices. When somebody acknowledges it, they then get receipt of that job. If they don't acknowledge it, it automatically escalates to the next person, the next contact person. Whatever workflow logic we've set up, it'll actually manage that and push that out. So instead of it blaring on the PA speakers, it's now silently sent. The other cool thing with Alinqua is that with wireless location, we can route it to the closest person. So if there's an orderly or a security person closest to the incident, instead of just sending it to the security team, and they could be 3 floors away, we can route the message initially to the closest person to that incident. So we're shortening the response time as well as keeping the hospital silent. So there's nothing worse than if you're in a hospital as a patient or a visitor and you're just hearing alerts and alarms going on the whole time. Like it's quite scary. So by doing this, like I said, Alinqua puts in a lot of the workflow on the smarts and makes it silent. It's also, the thing that I really like about it is it's all data driven. So once you've got this tool in there, you can then analyse where you're losing time. You can look for efficiencies as to how you can speed up your workflow. In a lot of hospitals, we have workflow written in a paper manual, but we can't report on where we're losing time, why it took 5 minutes for this response, but only 2 minutes for that response. When we get into a message integration engine, we can actually report on every component, when it was actioned, when it was accepted, and we can start looking at the analytics as to how do we improve our processes, where we don't have that information today. So we touched on RTLS, location services. That's definitely a big use case. It's probably, from my point of view, in the foundation of the network, wireless is one of the key things where you get multiple use cases out of. If you do your wireless right, you don't just do it as a wireless data network. If you roll it out as a voice-capable, RTLS-capable wireless network, there's multiple use cases that we can overlay then on that technology. We can do things like asset tracking. So we can set off alerts. So an example is with Alinqua, we can actually have an RFID tag on a device, and if it goes out a door, we can set off a silent alert to the nurse manager that there's an asset being walked out. A classic is some of the bed sensors. The bed sensors get rolled up in the bed sheets by the cleaners and just get wheeled out in the trolleys. They're 5, 10 grand each sensor. They just get wheeled out in the trolleys. Just having an RFID tag on them so that alerts the nurse station that one's left the room and they can just stop the cleaner and say, oh, can you just check the bedding there? I think you've got one of our sensors. Locating wheelchairs, locating other critical services. Again, RTLS is your friend. The mother-baby association. Again, with Alinqua, we can do things like if there's a separation of mother-baby, we can actually shut the maternity door. So integrating with the building management system, we can shut the doors before we can, we can resolve that incident. So RTLS, there's a lot of use cases of RTLS, but it requires your foundation layer to be done right. So within the hospital environment as well, over in New Zealand, audio visual is a key. Making sure you put in a platform, or we've put in a platform that can integrate with everything. Our concept is every screen should be able to be used for everything. So it's not just a digital signage screen. We can put maze maps on it. We can put free-to-air content on it. We can put queuing information on it. So we can put any information on any screen. So if the hospital at some stage decides, everything's designed by plan initially when you're building a new hospital. When you actually get in there after 3 months, 6 months, and your workflows and your patterns and people's movements changed, the versatility of making sure that we can change that screen to a different function or a different role without replacing it is a key driver. So making sure that the platforms are fully integratable. Room booking. So most hospitals will also have a standard working environment. So they'll have meeting rooms and they'll have office areas as well. So when we looked at room booking in our hospital, we wanted to give the staff multiple ways where they could do the booking. We didn't want just one medium for doing the booking. So we went with the traditional Outlook so you can book it as a resource in Outlook. That's the standard approach, that's there. But because we've got maze maps, we also wanted the visual concept, where I can actually bring up a map and see the status of each room, green or red, and just right-click and book. We then also take that image and we can put it on a digital display board at the front of the hallway. So the hallway where there's multiple rooms, we've got a large screen where it's got the rooms and the colours, whether they're green or red. So as I walk down for my room, for my meeting, I can see which one's free if I want to immediately grab it. We also have concierge room panels. So again, for the walk by, when I'm walking by and I want to have a quick meeting, I can just walk up and press a button. The cool thing that we've got as well happening is we have a QR code on the concierge device. So if people don't want to touch the panel due to hygiene, they can scan it with their mobile and it'll launch maze maps. And then they can book the room via the maze map interface. So it gives them multiple options for how they can book the device. The requirement that we had from the client was that they wanted to be able to actually report on real occupancy data versus booked occupancy. So yes, there was 15 people that booked the room, but actually how many showed up? Did 20 people show up and the room's only designed for 15? Did only 3 people show up? So we actually work with Contact.io, the beam sensors. You stick them above and they'll give you the real people count. So we're getting the real people count from that. The beautiful thing that I liked about it was it integrates natively into Cisco Spaces, and then also maze maps integrated with there. So I didn't have to write anything new. I didn't have to go pull data into a central database. I could just pull all that information out, and maze maps are giving me a great report on booked versus actual people. Heat maps, usage, it's all there out of the box, which is quite cool. So we're hoping, obviously, we've just kicked off this project, been awarded, which is great, and this is what we're planning to build for the client, and we're hoping at the end of the day, the patient with that experience is totally better than the current experience, which, like I said, is a paper emailed out form. Sorry, it's an mailed out form, not even emailed out form, with no visibility of what their care plan is, or care team is, or entertainment as well. So just to recap, the digital platforms that we're putting in is 5 Faces. 5 Faces is more like I said, the digital front door. So it's extending that front door to the mobile device, very much like the airline industry. So you can check in, check out, you can update your appointments, you can fill out forms. The smart forms, we actually presented it to one hospital, they loved it because they're like, every time we have to actually fill in a prerequisite form, each clinic has different requirements and they try to standardise on one form. So it ended up being like 60, 70 parameters that they emailed out that somebody would have to fill in. Because we can do smart forms and we can tailor which form goes to which clinic meeting, it can cut right down the number of fields the patient has to fill in, making it a lot easier and streamlined. Maze maps, we are for wayfinding, and we've embedded cross-integration with all the different products. So like you saw, from 5 Faces application, I could launch maze maps. From OneView, I could launch maze maps. And from Alinqua, which is the RTLS, I'm also linking to maze maps to pull up that location data. So it's making sure we can get that integration across all those different stories. OneView was the patient engagement platform. It's really cool. I think it's at Epworth here in Victoria as well, just installed. So a really cool platform, especially if you're like me and you like lots of information when you're in hospital. So helps you calm your nerves when you can see what's going on. And Alinqua for the quiet hospital. So the behind the scenes, the message integration, the task management, the workflow management, really looking at how we drive efficiencies. Just to recap and touch on, all of this requires that foundation layer. Yeah? So digital applications in the hospital are great. They really can improve the patient experience, take a lot of stress and anxiety out of it for the visitor and the patient. But you really have to have that foundation working really well because your exposure is a lot greater now. You've put a lot of people onto this, they can see it. The fact that your network may go down when you are mailing something out meant nothing, but when it goes down when everybody can see it, even though there might not be loss of life, politically, there's a lot of pressure when people see health systems go down. I think in Queensland recently, their medical record system went down. There was no loss of life in the event, but it was in the news, frontline news. Queensland medical health record system goes down. So, digital's great, but the foundation's got to be ready and you've got to be able to support it. Awesome. All right. Thanks very much. I'm on the stand for the rest of the week, I think. So if anybody's got any questions or would like to talk in more detail about the use case, the key, like I said, for me as the architect was I wanted to work with vendors that were cloud-enabled and mobile mentality. Like, there was a lot of vendors that we went out and looked at were old school, and they didn't really want to integrate, didn't want to work with anybody else. They did their job. I was very much looking at that streamlined flow and journey, and the only way we could get that if they were all open and being, happy to play together. And the 4 vendors that I found have been nothing but. So it's been great to work with them 4 vendors. Thanks very much for your time.